So what do we think of Penn State? Nebraska gets Penn State Saturday night on the road. Happy Valley, one of the most terrifying places to play in the nation. Even if you're a 3-6 team who seems to have lost your season, it's still going to be pretty nasty. And I mean, Penn State, what an incredible season they've had. You lose in double overtime to Oregon, and then you lose your next two games when you're a 20-point favorite in both. I don't think that's ever happened in history until this year came along. And then your coach gets fired and everything seems lost. And you finally find some salvation in the fact that you beat Michigan State the week before you play Nebraska at home, at night, where everything's going to be hopping. Sometimes it seems like everything is stacked against us. On the other hand, we should go into this game with an attitude that it's going to be a hell of a challenge. And I'm sure that, the narrative kind of around this game is, what is TJ Lateef, our freshman young quarterback, going to do on a road game at night in a hostile environment? And I'm not sure let's face it, that's a big storyline, right? And it's going to be interesting to see how he does. But I think more than that, for me, hopefully for you, if I can convince you, is what is our offense going to do Saturday night in this hostile environment? Is our offense going to, listen, Penn State, I've watched a fair amount of Penn State football just because we're going to play them and I wanted to see how they were playing. And Penn State's defense is very, very good. They're going to probably do the same thing to our offensive tackles that Michigan did earlier this season, which was harass them to death and make them look like fools. And it's going to be very hard to score points against the Penn State defense. And my concern is this, very specifically. Are we going to go into this game and we're going to play it like an NFL game? I've mentioned this in the past. Are we going to take it easy? Are we going to try to play without risk? Are we going to try to grind out some yardage, just try to get first downs, try to just stay in the game so we can maybe win it late in a field goal? I am guessing that's what our offense is going to look like, and I think that that's absolutely the wrong approach. Penn State, put it this way. We know that our rush defense is not very good. It's 92nd in the nation. That's pretty crappy. Just in case you didn't know that. Penn State's rush offense is not phenomenal, but they're pretty good at it, especially against a team they won't be able to defend against the run. And it's not like something magical is going to happen where we're suddenly going to fill our defensive tackles. Maybe we could put barbells in their pants and just make them be heavier that way so they could clog up the middle of the lines. But if we get into the type of game where it's a rock fight, I've mentioned that in the fast, or a slugfest, and we try to, just eke out yardage on offense, and while their offense does the same to us, I think that's a recipe for failure for Nebraska. So for me, the biggest storyline in this game is, what is our offensive game plan going to look like going through this game? If I was going to do this, if I was the offensive coordinator and making all that sweet money, I would RPO everything. I would misdirect as much as possible. I would option, and I'm not talking about the old option, speed option. RPOs are an option, run pass option. I would do that a lot. Maybe throw in some screen passes once in a while. I don't think you want to run TJ Lateef too much because you just get beat to death. But I think that you have to do things to keep Penn State's defense off balance as much as possible, get the ball out fast, take shots downfield. Something that Nebraska has not done worth a damn this year is explosive plays. And let's look that up real quick because, I'm sitting here from my computer and I can just do that. Nebraska is 78th nationally in explosive plays. And those are plays over, when you're looking at cfbstats.com, those are plays over 10 yards mostly. You consider anything when there's a running play over 10 yards, an explosive play, and a pass play over 20. We're not good at that. And we need that if we expect to beat Penn State Saturday night. And I don't think you get those plays unless you're actually taking shots to get them. And that's what worries me. Are we going to be taking the shots downfield, or are we going to be putting plays in the game plan that allow us to get something downfield? Or are we just going to play it safe and make sure that we don't have any turnovers and die by 1,000 cuts? I think John Butler is a pretty decent defensive coordinator. He doesn't have the horses up front to stop against the run. We're missing Ty Robinson. I think we all know this. I'm not saying anything that's crawling out on too thin a limb. What we need in this game to beat Penn State is between 28 and 31 points, because they're not a huge scoring offense. Their offense has struggled a lot. That's why they've lost games. They lost Drew Aller for the season earlier, and their young freshman quarterback, like Drunkenmiller or Grunkmeyer or some damn thing like that. He's coming along, but he's not, their offense is still kind of sluggish. But they're going to score probably between 21 and 24 points, which means we probably need 28 to 31 points to beat them. And how are we going to get those points? Mike Eckler's special teams earlier in the season seemed like they were setting the world on fire, and they've largely disappeared in later games. They're still playing pretty well, but we could use at least one touchdown because of special teams. Maybe a block punt or a good return. The return game is way ahead, and everything's way ahead of where it was. But it'd be nice to have special teams contribute like a touchdown in this game. So that would leave us with, we got to come up with 24 points on offense. Well, I don't think we're going to do that slugging our way down the field. I just don't. I think Penn State will do a much better job of that. We're out our defense. John Butler seems to be one of these guys that allows, gives up yardage until he gets to the red zone, and because it's compacted space, it's easier to defend. And then I think that's kind of the attitude I see John Butler having on defense, where he mixes it up every once in a while with some blitzes or some things, stunts, things going on. But he's pretty much content to give up yardage until he gets down the field. I don't think you can do that in this game because, again, I think Penn State's just going to run the ball right at us, and they're just going to wear us down over 4 quarters. So unless we can get into, my perfect game against Penn State would be Nebraska comes out on offense, whatever our first offensive possession is. Dana usually does. Dana and I are on a first name basis, obviously. Dana usually does a very good job with his scripted plays, but I think we need to score in the first possession, and then we need to make things happen early. And the reason for that is, we're looking at 2 teams in Nebraska and Penn State that I don't know if they're, because of the Minnesota game, I have to question how mentally tough Nebraska is. We've seen this over the years where they get into games, bad things happen, and they've fallen apart. That's become much less noticeable, or it's happened less frequent in the Matt Rule's tenure, but it's still there to a certain point. It happened at Minnesota, the beginning of the midway through the third quarter, that game was pretty much over, and we just kind of walked around and just let the rest of the game run out without, I don't think, really making the huge effort to try to win it and come back. Maybe people saw that differently than I did. Anyway, I think if you can go out and make statements early, then maybe you can get Penn State into that mode where they crumble. And I'm going to put my old manish, I am an old man. I'm an old crusty man. We always have this thing about generations where we see each other differently. And, I'm sure that the generation above me told me we were lazy and we didn't know how to work. And we look down at the generation below us and we say the same shit. So you see a lot more of what I call snowball games now. I think there's a lot more of them than there used to be, where teams are just overpowering other teams. In the past, like in the old Big 8 days, I think it was because Nebraska and Oklahoma had way more talent than everybody else. Now I think you see these snowball games because just players aren't as resilient, and they go into games and things get bad, and that's it. They just go, well, we'll have next week. Indiana does this to a lot of people. Maybe that's unfair, the whole resilience thing, but that's how I see it. I'd love to hear comments otherwise, or told that I'm completely wrong. That'd be fun. That'd be fine. what I would be concerned is that for either team, not so much Penn State because I want to beat them, but for either team that this becomes a snowball game where they get beat up early and then they just start kind of whatever. We'll get the next one, that kind of attitude and walking around the field. I would like to see Nebraska's offense be very aggressive. And I know there's this attitude that, well, Matt Rule's been aggressive in that he's gone for it on fourth down. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how you move the ball and the plays you call in your offense to take chances at getting big plays or explosive plays. Is that going to lead to more turnovers? Yeah, because it's higher risk. But we seem to have this attitude now where we're playing without taking a lot of risks. Again, it's the NFL style of football. And I get it. In years past, we've lost a lot of games because other teams just wait for us to make a mistake. And we do, and we give the game to them. And maybe that's the problem with being more aggressive on offense. But I think, again, in this game, if you try to just physically stay with Penn State, our lines are not going to be able to do that. Now, the other thing that bothers me is this. Matt Rule's, one of his most famous phrases now is, if we die, we die. I think it's a particularly stupid phrase, the guy that's been dead already once. I think it's just a dumb phrase. But what it's kind of a YOLO, you only live once, yay, throw caution to the wind attitude. Well, he doesn't show that much on the field. So I got a new phrase from Matt Rule. You can put this on a t-shirt or whatever. The things you be doing should match the bullshit you're spewing. And that's really Saturday night what I'll be watching for is how does Nebraska's offense handle Penn State. I think that over the course, we all complain about the off defense, the 90-second against the run, things like that. The defense isn't our problem for our Nebraska football team. The offense needs to be scoring. I've made this point before. I'll say it again. They need to be scoring in the 30s every game. Doesn't matter who they're playing. They need to figure out how to score at least 31 points. And we need, 28 to 31 points to win this game. That's my Penn State preview. I welcome any comments you got. And we'll talk to you later. Go get Big Red.